So I'll call the January 23rd meeting of the School Building Committee to order. And this is the first time that we are being taped for broadcast on the Community Access Channel. So we'll be doing that from this point forward throughout the feasibility study and beyond. I first of all want to welcome our newest member of the Board of Selectmen to the committee. Mike Perez will be officially representing the Selectmen on the committee. And for his benefit, I would like to go around the room. I know a lot of people, you probably know only half the people here anyway, Mike. But and for the purpose of the fact that this is the first meeting that we're broadcasting, helpful to the townspeople to know who's on the committee as well. So I'm Gary Keith, the chair, and as you introduce yourself, if you're representing a certain board or committee or commission or interest group, you can just mention that as well. So, Mark.
Mark Bottle, Superintendent of Schools.
Donna Hume, Chair of the School Committee.
Karen Alves, third grade teacher.
David Schmidt, School Committee. Grace Lane, Principal at Howard.
Kathy Marvel, Director of Student Services.
Kathy Grant, Business Manager.
Hi, Mike.
Hello. John Collins, School Technology Director.
Debbie Young, Director of School Development.
Jim Henderson, Board of Directors of, the Council on Aging.
President.
President. Member.
Marcy Lee, ADA coordinator.
Michael Perez, Board of Selectmen and Veterans Committee.
Sarah Connolly, parent.
Scott Leach, parent. Rawl, Chairman of the Water Commission and resident.
Jim Holden, Finance Committee.
And resident.
Mary Anderson, president and parent.
Bill Flynn, resident.
Wayne Tebow, Patrick.
All right, great. Well, welcome back, everybody. I know we've had a few months of elapse, and we'll update you on what has been happening. And as I alluded to when I sent out the email changing our original time frame, some of it was good news in the fact that we had been ahead of schedule in that process to go to town meeting and all the preparation that was necessary to bring our proposed feasibility study agreement to the MSBA. And so I'll update you on that, what went on after our October meeting. But first of all, I do want to entertain a motion to accept the minutes from October 17th.
Move.
Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? So voted. Thank you. So what happened after a town meeting was we had a significant time delay to get to the MSBA Board of Directors, and that was built into the schedule. We were pretty early in going to town meeting with the time frame that we had available. We had up until like November 27th. So we were about 6 weeks ahead of the time frame that was available to us, which was good. We were done and we were ready to go. We got the vote. Mark and I participated virtually at the December 13th MSBA board meeting, and we dutifully sat through a number of communities that were going through the process of where we were before a year ago with entering into feasibility. And then I think I put in the email to you, we were the only community out of the 10 that got accepted at the end of 22. We were the only one that had gone through the full process and got the town meeting vote and were ready to go into feasibility. So I think that's a pat on the back for everybody in terms of the efficiency that we had and the short time frame we had to get to the town meeting vote and a successful town meeting vote. So the motion was made to accept us into feasibility, and there's a nuance here that I want to also talk about, just so you're clear on, because it's confusing to me, but I understand the way MSBA operates, and I guess why they do what they do, but on the other hand, part of me, it doesn't make any sense. But you'll recall that the motion that got made at town meeting referenced the Roselle primarily, but it talked about the other two schools. And that was done intentionally because when the MSBA accepted the statement of interest in the feasibility, it was just for the Roselle McDonald School, but it was understood that the other two schools would be part of the discussion and when we go into feasibility in terms of how we solve the problem that we're going to solve in terms of whether or not we look at just 2 schools or 3 schools or whatever it is, whatever it might be. But technically, the MSBA accepted the project based on Roselle McDonald. Apparently, when they did that a year ago, at the end of '22, they also, at the same time, rejected Spring Street School as a standalone project. The letter where they did that would have been the same time they sent us the letter accepting Roselle. And it was a little confusing as to why they did that. And it came to light because when they accepted us into feasibility, they told us to do a statement of interest for Howard School. Because they said, look, we really want you to look at the consolidation of all three schools. You've given us the Roselle McDonald School Statement of Interest. You've given us Spring Street Statement of Interest. We want you to give us Howard School Statement of Interest. So we did that and went through the same process and submitted all that paperwork. So at the end of '23, when they got through the end of this cycle, again, we got a letter formally accepting us after that December 13th MSBA board meeting, accepting us into the feasibility process, but we got another letter rejecting the Howard School. So the optics of all this to me are very confusing because we're working under the guideline of looking at all three schools. It's what was in the town meeting motion that they approved and endorsed that motion. When they made the motion at the MSBA board meeting on December 13th, the discussion with the motion included discussion of all three schools. So their vote to accept us into feasibility was done under that context. They accepted our design enrollment for all three schools. So we know we have to look at an option just for the Roselle McDonald School. That's their mandate to us because that's the school they've accepted. But the statement of interest, the language included in the statement of interest for the other two schools, even though technically they've rejected them, that language is in all the paperwork that's moving forward. We're going to talk about the request for services for the OPM in a minute. All that language from the statement of interest for all three schools is in there. So we are still working on a project to look at the consolidation of anywhere from 1 to 3 schools. But it is confusing because instead of making that nuance when they accepted us into feasibility, they just gave us the acceptance based on Roselle McDonald, and we now have 2 letters, one rejecting us for Spring Street, one rejecting us for Howard. So it's confusing, I know, but I just want to try to clarify that, at least to the level that I understand at this point. Does that make sense to you, Mark? What you heard?
I think the rationale is that they want to make sure the town is going to support the potential up to 3 schools, that board of selectmen. That's why we went through the process of the school committee, but it does seem a little confusing too. And we go through the process knowing that we will be rejected, so that includes more than 1 school, but they want to make sure, I think, that the town is standing behind the potential to consolidate all 3 schools.
Yeah, I just wish they would use some clarifying language when they issue those letters, because it's just a form letter that says, Roselle McDonald accepted into feasibility, other 2 schools rejected. It just from a practical standpoint doesn't make any sense. Does anybody have any questions? Mary?
I do, Gary, does it mean that we could possibly only be looking at Roselle?
Well, we have to do that as a design option. If the first design option we have to look at is just for Roselle McDonald School, because that's a technicality based on the fact that that's the school we rejected. Even though all the discussions we've had with MSBA staff, this was during the enrollment figure process, all the discussion says we are not just doing 1 school. This doesn't make any sense for us as a town. And it doesn't make any sense for them as a state either, because they were prodding us to do the consolidation.
Do we have any inclination on whether they need Roselle in spring, or maybe we have no idea which way they're leaning just yet?
Well, we know we have to do a design, and we have to do multiple design options, and one of them will be for the Roselle McDonald School, because that's the formality that we have to do.
I forgot we had to present multiple.
Yes, and so we know, and the OPM, when they get on the project and start discussions with us, and the designer, when they start working on the project, they're gonna know that project for just the Roselle McDonald School will not be feasible, but they'll still have to go through the process of looking at it.
Thank you, that makes sense.
No question. All right.
Just would it be worth either asking them for a plain language explanation or writing one to send to them and say, this is our understanding going forward, so if the question comes up from people in the town
I don't think
about
we'll,
what does it mean? Does it mean we start down this road and suddenly anything we spend beyond Roselle, they don't reimburse?
no, I don't think.
I understand they won't, but could we get
I don't
something?
think, I don't think they would issue that letter for one thing, Art, because it's outside the scope of what they do and how they operate. But I take great comfort in the fact that the motion that we presented at town meeting and that language was endorsed by them includes the reference to all three schools. And again, the feasibility document, the request for services document for the OPM and for the designer, as that moves forward, that has all the language in it for all three schools. So every piece of documentation we're producing references all three schools. So there's nothing, there shouldn't be any surprises because we're working from basis of the formal documents that have been approved that reference all three schools.
And if I may, the scope of feasibility study, which was signed off by all members of the town, does include those grade level configurations and the school names, with the enrollment for each of the four potential buildings.
Yeah.
So it's pretty clear, although it's not.
Which is the point someone could ask.
Did the rejection say anything just that maybe they were rejected as a standalone?
Yes, that's the basis of it. But,
Okay.
but to me, Howard was most confusing because they asked us to do Howard. And so it's like,
Well, they have to like put it in with the others, but not as a standalone project.
right, but that was the only way we could submit it. You know, we followed their process for a statement of interest as a standalone project. And so it was just a little strange to get a rejection based on something that they asked for, but that's the way they work.
And what I can imagine is with the statement of interest being a pretty standard form that they use and the people bidding on it use, then it's very consistent when we're attaching them to the RFS or OPMs or designers are looking at. They know exactly what they're looking for within that document. So it just seems maybe an easier way for them to proceed, but it was a lot of work to put it all together, to go through all the approvals just to have information be attached to another future document.
Any other questions about that? Okay. Moving on to the OPM Designer Selection Subcommittee. And the first action, and this was probably an oversight on my part, is that we need to add Kathy Grant to the subcommittee roster. We didn't do that, and really by the function she has within the school department, she should be part of that. We've had 2 meetings, she's been there, but I want to make sure she's able to cast votes as we move the process of the subcommittee along. So I'd like to entertain a motion to add Kathy to the subcommittee roster.
I'll move we add Kathy Grant to the subcommittee roster.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Okay, the OPM requests for services. Mark.
Okay, so we had training, we went to an orientation for this, gathered great information. It's a template that we need to follow, about a 22-page document. There's some standard information, some information we need to add in. They asked us to have the draft to them by January 18th, so we submitted on the 17th. We just heard back with some comments just this afternoon, which was helpful for our subcommittee meeting. Some things we need to do, some things we need to add. The goal is to hopefully get it done over the next 2 days and resubmit it back. So what's included in this document, some of the highlights, we will include all 3 statements of interest. I think that's very much part of what we're doing. It gives every person bidding on the job a good opportunity to learn about the 3 school buildings. We will provide background information. So we're pulling some information out and adding some additional information into the RFS so they can read that. We do include all the projected enrollment. So just so we're all on the same page, the Roselle McDonald's grades 1 to 3 is projected at 455 students. K to 4, which consolidates Spring Street and Roselle, and grade 4 at the Howard, knowing that that building really can't hold 3 grades in the future. It's 750 students. 1 to 6 building, which would be the Roselle and the Howard, is 930 students. And then K to 6, which would be Spring, Roselle, and Howard, 1,075. The grade or the group that's left out is our preschool. That's not counted in, but they do allocate a space. We can get about 75 students. So in the buildings that would be pre-K and K, you'd add about 75 students to that. Within the RFS, we have discussion on community concerns and limited space available in town. We don't have a lot of town-owned space and value product usability, but we put that out there. And some of the concerns we have with the community, things such as available gym space, it's limited in town, so we want to make sure that space is large enough to host youth athletics, so we could take some pressure maybe off this gym up here. They list some projected duration of the project set by the MSBA. The feasibility schematic design goes 20 to 24 months. Design, development, construction, planning phase 10 to 12 months, and then construction 24 to 36 months, all pretty standard. Within the document, we had to list evaluation criteria, 11 different criteria, and we assign point values for each one of those. Equal to 100, so as the subcommittee goes through each candidate, OPM candidate, we look and review and score them. And then the schedule. So, as I said, we're looking to get the draft back to them this week by Friday, with the goal of February 7th. The RFS appears in the Central Register for advertising. We also have to talk about putting it into the general circulation of the newspaper. February 14th, we'll have an informational meeting and site inspections, and that'll be a date that firms can come out and view the schools if they come around. February 16th at 10 a.m. will be the last day for questions from respondents. February 21st will be the due date for all of the OPM selections. They're going to submit them by then. Then by the 28th of February, we'll have a short list for that. More likely 3 to maximum 4 or 5 that will be interviewed. March 6th, we'll interview. That's the day we'll set. We interview. Hopefully, we'll use the town library again. March 11th, we'll begin negotiations with the selected number 1 respondent. March 13th, the final selection will be submitted to the MSBA for their review and approval. And then we'll wait to go to the MSBA OPM review panel on April 8th, with the hope of them approving who are number 1 candidate, and we'll go into negotiations after that. Hopefully April 10th. We also have a list of number of certifications that we're going to require for the RFS to really protect us and protect us. So a lot goes into it. The subcommittee is great. MSBA has been great in terms of answering some questions, so hopefully we can finalize this week.
So the timing, it feels fast, but it feels a little spread out too, because in essence, what we're saying is that we won't have an OPM available to start work with us until April 8th. So this timeline does affect the timing of this full committee, because I don't want to bring us together unless we've got things to take action on. And so it'll be a tight time frame when it does occur, but squeezed in there, we need to move the February meeting a couple of weeks. So basically what we're going to do is not have the February 27th meeting, not have the meeting that's scheduled in March, at the end of March, and we'll combine those 2 meetings into 1 meeting on Tuesday, March 12th. So the agenda at that meeting will be for the subcommittee to bring back to you for your endorsement, the final selection of the OPM that we'll be submitting to the MSBA the very next day. So we will present that to you with our justification of why we made the selection. It should be pretty easy to do based on the evaluations that we've put together as a committee. We do that individually. The 8 members will do that individually. Then we'll meet and do a consensus to pick the top 3 to 5, as Mark said, to interview. And then coming out of that, we would move forward with our top selection and bring that forward to you for endorsement. So that's the game plan for now. And then after that March 12th meeting, again, we have to just sit tight until MSBA endorses that selection at their April 8th meeting. The process for OPM is a little more rigid. It's a little more, it mirrors what we have to do with the designer, which is what we did last time. We had a little bit more flexibility on our own with the OPM selection when we did this project here in the senior high school. They've aligned the requirements and the timing for OPM selection now to really mirror what they do for the designer process. And, I understand from their perspective of why they're doing it, but it does, drag things out a little bit in terms of us as a full committee wanting to get moving. On the positive side is coming out of that April 8th meeting, assuming that we're all on the same page with NSBA, and I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be. The OPM can immediately start work with us, and the OPM will be a key factor in helping us in the designer selection process. And from experience with this project, the OPM that we had for this project was a huge help in going through that evaluation on the design. There's a lot of heavy lifting that has to occur with that process. But we'll go through a similar thing. There'll be a request for services. There'll be response to that. There will be a grading, interviews, selection, and again, there'll be another review panel with the MSBA that a couple of months down the road that will do the designer selection. So, it'll probably be mid-year before we're ready to start moving, actually doing work with feasibility with an OPM and a designer. But that's the planning. So, any questions of all that? I know that was a lot of information. Dave?
Yeah, I'm going by memory of the date. When does it go into central register?
February 2nd.
And in the RFS request from them is going to be due on February 21st.
Yes. Those are dates of I believe those are.
That's the time frame they've worked. So all these OPMs are used to that 2-week turnaround.
Really?
Yep.
Because that's a lot of work for someone to look at, digest, and be able to quote on in only a couple of weeks.
Yeah, these aren't our dates.
Right, some were flexible our dates, like the interviews and so
The
forth, but I
interviews,
think those were set dates by then.
We're working within the milestones that they've established in their master schedule. They set up a master schedule based on when they do the selection date. So we back up from that April date with the milestones. They give us those dates, and then we're squeezing in a couple other things in terms of subcommittee selection and interviews within those timeframes. But the major milestones in terms of central register and response date and submission to the MSBA are dates that they're establishing. They're not our dates. It's a quick turnaround.
So what were some of the criteria that were used for the basis of evaluation?
Past projects was one. Past performance of the respondent, performance on previous projects, satisfactory work relationship with designers, contractors, their knowledge of Mass State Building Code, knowledge of procurement laws, and these are all were developed by this template. So we didn't go off the template. We used their template. We just assigned the point criteria. Okay.
Yeah, we had the flexibility to put the point criteria in, but the boilerplate of what the OPM has to respond to is pretty standard within the MSB language, the template for the request for services.
So how are we weighing it? What are some of the higher priorities?
Past performance.
Past performance was a big one. And there's also, we'll have to, there's a time frame in there that we'll have to do reference checks too for the, obviously for the top candidates. We have to do a series and that's part of the grading schedule that we have to do is the reference checks too.
Other ones, just to clarify, some of the other ones we rated a little bit higher was capacity and skills, identifying employees' experience, so looking at who we're getting, identify the respondent's current projected workload, and make sure we're not one of many
that's already overloaded.
things like that.
All right, any questions on any of that?
Suggestion, because I mean, if I was on the full committee and not on the subcommittee and hearing the stuff as we go, If we could maybe distribute stuff ahead of time, when that finally goes into MSBA, let a copy to the full committee.
Yeah.
When we do the rankings of the people after the interviews, so send that out with who's on the short list, so the committee at least has something they can look at before we show up one night and say we had 8 responses, we shortlisted 3, we interviewed the 3, and we want you to sign off on
There may
this.
be limitations on what we can distribute to the full committee for the OPM respondents in general. We definitely will be able to distribute our analysis for our top selection to help you in terms of what our thought process was and why that OPM was selected. But I think there are limitations with what we can provide to the whole subcommittee. Mark mentioned the training that we have at the SBA on the OPM selection process. We were under strict compliance not to distribute the PDF presentation of what they shared with us to the full committee. We could only share it with the 8 people on the subcommittee. So they've got pretty tight restrictions on what they will allow to be sent out. But certainly when we come to you on that meeting on the March 12th, we'll certainly share with you all the information and the justification in terms of why we're making that selection. If we have the capability to at least maybe look at that information relative to the other 2 or 3, the short list, don't have any problem.
I'm just thinking, there's 8 of us that are doing an awful lot
Yeah.
compared to what, and it's gonna be all happening and kind of be tied up with a bow on it at that meeting. So the more we can give to the full committee.
I don't disagree, because if I was in your shoes, I'd want to have at least have a good sense of what that information is. And we'll be sharing with you before we send it to MSBA. We're not sending it to them until after you've made it to us. Other questions, comments, concerns? All right, is everybody clear on the schedule? So Mark will update the calendars for you subsequent to the meeting, but so no meeting on February 27th. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, March 12th, here at 6 p.m. And then no meeting on March 26th, I believe is what's on the calendar. So no meeting that day. And then I would expect to hold the April, the regularly scheduled April meeting. And as I said, hopefully that'll be the first meeting with our new OPM on board. All right. Any other questions, comments, any other business that needs to be brought before the committee? All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
All those in favor? All right, well, thanks again. Good to see everybody again.
Leave your tags.
Thank you.